Councillor Alex Williams to the meeting. I hope you enjoy it on licensing, Alex. Thank you. Right, can I welcome all members and officers to the meeting of the Licensing Committee, which, due to government advice to practice social distancing, this meeting will be held virtually. The meeting is being recorded and will be available via the Council's website to be viewed following the meeting. Everyone participating in the meeting will be accessing this meeting from remote locations. Please could everybody ensure that mobile phones are switched off and to silent mode. Members will have received an electronic copy of the agenda. I will ask officers to present a summary of the key points. For the record, the agenda can be viewed on the Council's website. Members and officers will be speaking at various points during the meeting, and those speaking may switch their cameras on at that point. But I would ask that, with the exception of myself as chairperson, at all times you keep your cameras and microphones switched off. If any members and officers wish to raise a point or question, they should use the instant messaging IM icon. Please do not use your microphone until I invite you to do so. Officers from Democratic Services will be supporting the committee and will be monitoring the use of microphones throughout the meeting, and where necessary will mute those not being used. Before we formally commence, I will now ask the officer from Democratic Services to announce the names of the councillors in attendance at this meeting. I would also ask the officers to introduce themselves as and when I invite them to speak. Thank you. Over to you, Michael. Or is it Mark?
I'll announce some, Chair. Yeah, thanks. I'm Mark Galvin. I'm Senior Democratic Services Officer Committees for the benefit of the recording. Members present today are Councillor Alex Williams, Councillor Altaf Hussain, Councillor David Lewis, Chairperson, Councillor Gary Thomas, Councillor Janice Lewis, Councillor Julia Williams, Councillor Mike Kearn, Councillor Pam Davis, Councillor Richard Collins, Councillor Malcolm James, Cllr Tom Beedle, Councillor Aniel Pachella. That's it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mark. Into the agenda. Apologies for absence.
I've received none, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Declarations of interest. No? Good. On to 3, approval of minutes. To receive for approval the minutes of the Licensing Committee and Licensing Act 2003 Committee of the 6th of October 2020.
Move, Chair.
Thank you.
Second.
Second. Thank you. On to number 4, Hackney Carriage Private Hire Vehicle Policy. Not quite sure whether it's Will or Yvonne taking this, but...
Hi, Chair. Yeah, Yvonne's going to take us through the report.
Okay, thank you. Well, over to you, Yvonne.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members.
Morning.
Morning. For the benefit of the minutes, it's Yvonne Witchell, Team Manager for Licensing, presenting this report. Okay, members, the purpose of the report this morning is to present to you proposals to change the age at which hackney carriage and private hire vehicles are first licensed, and to present proposals to change the vehicle testing policy and frequency. Within your report, we outline the current situation regarding the conditions and the age policy guidelines. The impetus for reviewing the policy came from the local trade, who indicated that the current policy, which requires vehicles presented for their first licence to be new or nearly new, placed a significant economic burden on the trade. This policy has been in place since March 2008. In addition, any changes to that policy needed us to review the testing requirements for hackney carriage and private hire vehicles. Initially, we undertook a consultation with the trade by way of questionnaire, seeking the views from the trade and the public on the proposed changes to the age and testing policies. A copy of that questionnaire is included at Appendix B of your report, and the responses are set out at Appendix C. Whilst we consulted on the age at which vehicles could be first licensed, no consultation was undertaken in respect of an upper age limit for vehicles, as the Department for Transport Best Practice Guidelines recommend that a local authority does not impose arbitrary upper age limits beyond which it will not continue to license a vehicle, but to look at the way vehicles are tested to ensure public safety for older vehicles. Following on and running almost parallel to that consultation was a change in the provisions for the licensing of taxis when that function was devolved to Welsh Government. So the review of the testing was put on hold, waiting the publication of national proposals which might have had an impact on local policy development. There haven't been any regulations published. There have been some consultations, but there is still no indication as to when any changes will apply, and therefore we are presenting this report to progress the local changes to policy. Whilst we were looking at age policies, it was clear that there was a wide variation in policies across local authorities in Wales, and within the report we outline the age at first licensing for Cardiff and the Vale of Glamorgan, the two other councils which form part of shared regulatory services. And as your members will see from the report, there are not only differences in the age at first licensing across those two authorities, but there are also within that variations for different types of vehicles. And we also looked at the range of ages across Wales. For example, when we looked at it, Merthyr was 4 years, Rhondda Cynon Taf 3 years, but there were differences again within those age ranges. So the initial consultation was undertaken to align with the Vale of Glamorgan guideline of 5 years, but that subsequently changed following a trade consultation. And it is recognised that all policies change according to local needs or trade requests and trade consultations. The current testing frequency is based on the Local Government Miscellaneous Provisions Act, which enables the councils to require testing of vehicles up to a maximum of 3 times per year. Okay. The wheelchair accessible vehicles also form part of the licensing process, and it was felt that the 5-year limit on first licensing should apply to all saloon vehicles and minibuses, but that those vehicles fitted with a permanent automated tail lift could be accepted for first licensing up to 10 years. Within that, all applications for vehicles will still need to provide evidence of the correct type approval, servicing and modification certifications. Moving on to the testing of vehicles then, the proposal is that hackney carriage and private hire vehicles up to 10 years old will be tested twice a year, and then vehicles that were over 10 years old tested 3 times a year. In order to facilitate the proposed changes, we've outlined at appendices D and E changes that will be needed to the current hackney carriage and private hire vehicle conditions of licences. We've met with officers of T. Thomas, the Joint Vehicle Maintenance Facility, to agree a way forward to provide MOT certificates for taxis rather than the current certificate of compliance, together with an additional declaration of fitness form which is specific to hackney carriage and private hire vehicle elements. And these would then fall under the umbrella of the recommended standards for hackney carriage and private hire vehicles created by the Freight Transport Association, and those requirements are at Appendix G to your report. The proposals would, if approved, come into effect on the 1st of February 2021 to give enough time to give the trade an indication of any new requirements if approved by committee. Within your report, we've made a request for provision of delegated powers to grant applications which fall within policy guidelines as per the current arrangements, and a provision should proprietors fail to submit their applications on time that they wouldn't be caught by the age policy guidelines, and that subject to it only being a reasonable period of 5 working days, that officers be permitted to grant the application under the scheme of delegation. That's a summary of admittedly a fairly long report, members. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to take them.
Thank you, Yvonne. Any questions, please?
Yes, please,
Pam,
Chair.
yeah.
Yes, please, Chair.
Okay, Pam.
Have we got enough capacity regarding the fitters, etc., with these added changes, if it's 3 times a year, for example, and I don't know whether there's a backlog of testing at the moment or anything. Can you put us in the picture, Yvonne, that we've got enough to actually comply and make sure that, you know, we can do, I mean, I welcome all of this because obviously the taxis are used maybe 24/7 on some occasions, and especially with the tail lifts, etc., they have quite a hammering because of the lack of vehicles that we've got actually in Bridgend with for the disabled. So I welcome all of this, but have we got enough capacity with the fitters, etc.?
Councillor, yes, we've met with the fleet manager. There are already 3 tests per year for some categories of vehicle, and they've confirmed that they have the capacity to carry out this work.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pam. Councillor Altaf Hussain.
Thank you, sir. Yuan, thank you very much for this presentation. My question is, you know, after 10 years of the vehicle life, it will be tested a few times, maybe 3 times a year. Till how long? What is the lifespan of these vehicles? When should we say no more? They should be on the road, knowing that so many old vehicles catch fire. We have the buses, we have school buses and every other vehicle which gets fire, and in many countries they have the lifespan of these vehicles not more than 15 years. So I don't know if there is any upper limit for these vehicles to be on the road. Thank you.
Councillors, as outlined in the report, the Department for Transport recommend that the council doesn't impose an arbitrary age beyond which it will not licence a vehicle, because with increasing vehicle standards, it's perfectly possible for older types of vehicle to be suitable for licensing. However, by increasing the number of tests to 3 times per year and having a declaration of fitness form which looks at all the elements relating to it being a hackney carriage or private hire vehicle, that would satisfy the requirements. And this proposal would allow operators to replace their vehicles more frequently rather than having to buy a new one each time their previous vehicle was no longer suitable for licensing.
Thank you, Yvonne. Altaf, okay?
Oh, well, it is. I won't agree with that because there should be a, guideline which will say that no more testing. It's 3 times a year. It's a lot of work, and you can see the involvement of the people, involvement of the garage, involvement of everybody for giving okay or not okay. There should be a time limit which should be adopted. And I don't know, recently they have come up with about these vehicles which are with run on the diesel, whether they should be on the road that time. That should be one of the clauses. We should say that no more diesel or petrol vehicles should be on the road after some time, really.
Yvonne? Right, okay, we'll note what you've said. I'll tap, obviously. A question from Councillor Malcolm James.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I've got no problem with this 5-year rule. I think, I say that because the standard of cars which are brought before us for the Licensing Committee have been first class, all right? But it's something that Altav just mentioned there about fire. When we've inspected these cars, I haven't seen a fire extinguisher or a first aid kit in there. Is that something I'm missing or are we missing? Thank you, Chair.
Dave, can I just come in? I know I'm jumping over everybody, but in a former life, I was secretary to a coach firm, and it's one of the requisitions that with PSV vehicles, they have to carry fire extinguishers, but also you'll find, Altaf, that with the coach firms, the actual buses they keep for schools are normally different to the ones they have on tours, simply because the kids used to vandalise and there was smoke in there and they burn the seats, etc. So it's a different, and the vehicles are mostly diesel, not petrol with the coaches, but you'll find a lot of older coaches running around simply because they are kept for schools and not for tours. There is a difference. Sorry if I've jumped over everybody, but I just thought I'd come in with my knowledge of that.
Thank you, Pam. Yvonne, over to you in relation to the fire extinguishers and the first aid kits.
Yeah, sorry, members. I think I dropped out for a second. Yes, the conditions of licence haven't changed. Vehicles must carry a fire extinguisher and first aid kit, and these are elements that will be the subject of spot checks by the enforcement officers.
Thank you.
Sorry, Chair, can I come back in on that?
Yes, Malcolm, it's something we need to remember.
Sorry, it's something we as a committee have to be very, very aware of. And I don't think in the past we've been aware, we've been aware of it, but I have not seen an extinguisher or a first aid kit in a car. And I think that's something we have to be very aware of in future inspections.
Certainly is.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Malcolm. Pam, do you wish to speak again, or was that it, what you just said?
No, I mean, I think it's all been covered. The only thing is, I will say, is that I suppose the inspectors will go round. They can't get round everybody, but very often if they use things out of the first aid kit, they're not replenished. I know I used to have to go around the coaches that we had and make sure that the men, if they did go in and get a plaster or whatever, which very often used to happen, then, they need to be replenished. But I am aware of that law, I had a PSV, license myself. So up until about 5 years ago, and I just jacked it in then because I'm getting too old to sit outside nightclubs now, waiting for drunken yobs. So, yeah, I mean, I am aware of it, but maybe I should have, said to people before on my licensing committee, but it should really be part of the training when we do our training for licensing, I think, to make people aware of it. And then we know exactly what we're looking for. But thank you, Chair, for giving me another chance.
Okay, thank you, Pam. Councillor Mike Kearn.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's going back to what Altaf was saying about the vehicles over 10 years old. Besides, obviously, they tested mechanically. If you've got a vehicle that's doing a regular run to, say, an airport, the seats at the back after 10 years constant wear, I mean, obviously they don't take that into account when they check these vehicles. But some of those seats probably after 10 years, 12 years wear are going to be so uncomfortable for people to travel in more than, 50, 60 miles from here to Bristol Airport or something. It just seems to me that vehicles over 10 years old just wouldn't be that comfortable. I mean, you get a group of people, rugby boys, say 3 in the back of a taxi on the way to Cardiff Airport on a regular basis for 10 years. Those seats are going to take a heck of a hammering. I mean, I know they could probably just cover them up or something, but I wouldn't want to be in the back of a taxi that's had seats constantly used for about 10 years, because I'd probably sink into it and I probably wouldn't be able to get out of it with a back problem. I just thought that, it just seems to me that vehicles over 10 years old, there's so much wear and tear, not the mechanical side, there's the other side of it, the comfort side of it. You can't expect people to sit in the back of a taxi with seats that are probably you're sinking right down. That's my opinion anyway. Thank you, Chair.
Yvonne.
Chair, could I draw members' attention to Appendix F? I think it's Appendix F of your report, where we outline the items that would be the subject of testing, and that includes the vehicle body condition, cleanliness, interior, doors, seats, security, operation and cleanliness, and other elements there relating to the taxi aspect of being a roadworthy vehicle.
Thank you, Yvonne. Okay, Councillor Kearn.
Well, yeah, I mean, regarding seats that have been used for about 10, 12 years, I mean, people sitting in them on a regular run to airports or whatever, there's got to be, I mean, you can say they might have covered them with something, but, we all know what our furniture is like after we've sat in a settee we've had in the front room for about 10 years. We tend to find the wife wants to change it, or the partner. It's just, I don't know, it just seems that vehicles over 10 years old to me are a bit suspect, to be honest with you, from other aspects besides mechanical, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Tom Beedle.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I couldn't get my video to come on then for some obscure reason. But it was just a response from to Councillor James, because when we examine vehicles down in Civic, these vehicles haven't been for plating. The necessary equipment, such as the fire extinguisher and first aid kit, have got to be present for the plating when it goes down to the test centre, so that we wouldn't see that anyway. But I have showed concern in the past for vehicles that are coming there with taxi signs on the roof, and of course radios fitted on meters, and yet we haven't forward these vehicles. We haven't agreed for these vehicles as a committee to go forward to a test, and I think that I don't know why we're allowing them to come in displaying these taxi signs, because we're unaware that they haven't picked up any fares en route to be licensed. So I think that's an important issue, but I'm also concerned about the age of the vehicles that come in front of us. And I know that what we should be looking at is possibly the fact where the initial guidelines were set out in 2008 as regards to the age of a new vehicle, but we want to be a little bit more conservative when we're looking at comparing ourselves and contrasting with other authorities. So that I think that's one of the things we should be discussing, because we want to be looking at vehicles coming in or possibly not coming in that are under 1 year of age, and I don't know, say 8,000 miles. But I do think that we're being very generous with the 5-year and 10-year rule. I think that we ought to reduce that. And that's purely my opinion from reading the report and looking at the age and conditions of vehicles. But I'm also concerned about the presentation of insurance, where it says subject to third-party risks. Surely that it should be a standard requirement that it's fully comprehensive, not subject to third-party risks. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. With that, if you don't mind, I'll call in Will Lane, who will probably be able to answer. Obviously, there's a couple of things to say, but we'll probably be able to answer that in relation to insurance. Over to you, Will.
Yeah, the point I was going to make was just to reiterate Yvonne's point about the upper age limit. So that's common throughout local authorities. We don't set an upper age limit. But I would stress that the test that is undertaken, it's not just the MOT test, it's also the declaration of fitness. And if you actually look at the sort of age of the fleet, you do tend to find that by relaxing the requirement that you have, say, a new vehicle, which is the current policy, that you actually get benefits because people tend to renew their vehicles more often, because there's not such an economic burden for replacing a vehicle with a vehicle that is in effect new. So it may sound counterintuitive that by actually relaxing the age of the first vehicle that you can license, you do tend to get a benefit in the overall age profile of the fleet. So that was one point I was going to make. As far as the insurance, I didn't quite catch that, unfortunately. My audio dropped there, but obviously as part of the certification of taxis, they all have to have insurance of the legal standard. So there's not an issue there in relation to passengers or anyone else not having insurance if there is an incident in a vehicle.
Thank you, Will. Councillor Julia Williams.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not going to put my video on. I don't want to frighten everybody first thing in the morning. What I want to say is I think I've made myself very, very plain over the last 3 years about the age of the vehicles. I 100% agree with Councillor Hussain. What this policy is now doing, which is the opposite of what I always wanted to do, is increasing the age of the vehicles that we're going to accept rather than decreasing it. And I'm just wondering, Will or Yvonne, who says that we can't set an upper age limit? Who's telling us we can't do this? Just because other authorities do it, does that mean that we have to follow suit? And we should be looking at reducing the age of vehicles now and getting these diesel and petrol vehicles off the road, or gradually doing it. And Will, you said the overall age profile of the fleet wouldn't be affected by this, or would be affected positively, I think you said. But I just don't agree. I think what we've been having is 5-year-old vehicles coming before us just because they're immaculate, they've been valeted throughout, and they look good. The next thing is going to be a 10-year-old vehicle coming before us, and then a 15-year-old one. And I know cars are much better these days than they were, but surely we've got to have some limit. We're just falling into the hands of all these taxi drivers. We're just rolling over and having our bellies tickled, really. Anyway, that's all.
Thank you, Julia. Will.
Yeah, I'm happy to come back on that. I mean, obviously, the current policy that members have before them says that any new vehicle any vehicle that is newly licensed must be in effect new. So you can't get more restrictive than that. I mean, ultimately, it's up to members whether they wish to step outside that policy and license a vehicle which is older than that. I would say, if you take, for instance, Cardiff, which has a 5 months as a new vehicle, because of the exceptions that are made, the actual age profile of the fleet is much higher than in an area like Bridgend, for instance. So the current situation is, I guess, in relation to the councillor's point about we should have newer vehicles. It currently says that any vehicle that is licensed should be new, and it's really members have taken a view, that is perhaps too restrictive when you have certain vehicles that are coming before committee and have stepped outside that. So this is really an amendment which brings Bridgend more into line with other local authorities who don't insist on all newly licensed on all licensed vehicles to be new, but also then it will be within the members' control. So if you have vehicles which are coming before you, which are outside of your policy, if you agree it, then it's entirely within your powers to say, no, we're going to stick to the 5-year vehicle rule that we adopt. And the point about older than 10 years, I mean, vehicles at the moment can be licensed over that age, provided they pass all the vehicle tests. So that would be my sort of response to the councillor's points. I don't know if Yvonne wants to come back in on
that. Yes, Councillor Williams mentioned where the recommendation regarding the upper age limit comes from, and that comes from the Department for Transport best practice guidelines, and Will has mentioned that a vehicle may pass all the mechanical tests because it is an exceptional condition, and were there to be an upper age limit where the council simply said we won't license it, then that decision would, and an application had been made, I think Andrea may confirm, the authority would be subject to an appeal against the decision.
Yes. The problem with putting a definitive upper age limit is, of course, there's always got to be discretion in law. Otherwise, one, someone could judicially review the policy, and two, obviously, it'll be subject to appeal because every application has to be based on its merits and the vehicle as you view it at the time.
Thank you, Andrea. Does that mean that we could refuse it on the grounds of the age of the vehicle, or would there have to be other reasons for refusing the licence?
Well, you stick to because the current policy is quite restrictive, but you always tend to, if the vehicle is in good condition, you depart from your policy. So that if you depart from any policy, there's got to be good reasons for doing it. Well, the reasons that you specify normally is because the vehicle is in such a good condition. So any policy you can depart from with good reasons. So if someone coming before you with a vehicle that was you weren't happy with, which you've done in the past, when they've had dents and things, then you can refuse it. But if you put an upper age limit, you're really restricting yourself.
Thank you, Andrea. Councillor Altaf Hussain.
Just a small point on Councillor Mike Kearns. I'll take that further. If you look at the Appendix F in testable items, I think the S5 should include seats and seat belts, not only seat belts. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Pam Davis.
Thank you, Chair. I don't disagree with what the other councillors have said, but I think, the taxi drivers, etc., will be restricted regarding their vehicles, because by the time that with mileage, so by the time that, because these vehicles are doing long hauls as well, up to Heathrow or whatever, the mileage alone, some of them have got 200, 250,000 on them. By the time they've clocked up that much, then obviously wear and tear on the seats and everything. You're not going to use a car like that day in, day out, maybe 24 hours a day, because it's handed over to other taxi men or women. So when it comes before us, we got a rough idea. And I think, we got Janice, who always looks at the seats and the safety angle because of the children. I always call her my Rottweiler. But, we are quite stringent on them, and we do look. And if there are little nicks or dents, we have actually refused before. So I think, us looking at the seats and everything, if we don't agree with it, then we don't grant the licence. It's as simple as that. And I can't remember, I think there was a bus caught fire in Brackler not so long ago, but it's very, very rare because of probably mechanical, not diesel, because it doesn't burn as good as petrol. But you notice that new vehicles, they've had a problem with Vauxhalls catching fires. It's not always the older ones. So luckily, hopefully, that's probably one of the good things about diesel is it's not as inflammable as petrol. But I do agree with the other councillors. And I think it's for us, if something, we got to err on the side of caution. If something comes before us and it's really tatty and it doesn't look roadworthy or safety-wise, then we got to turn it down. And it does go for those tests. I know with the buses, they're very stringent. It used to be certificate of fitness, etc. So they do look at all of the aspects because, when you've got people sat behind you, sometimes you've got 52 people. It's a lot to be responsible for. And as I was told in Cardiff when I was a full-time officer with the union, the bendy buses, it's like I had the police in with that because we were looking for a policy to do with evacuation if there was suspicious packages left on them. And that is like a mini aircraft. And although they got 17 cameras on them, you still got to be vigilant. And it's a lot of people behind you that you've got responsible, or you're responsible for. I think people forget that, they are professional drivers and they are taught all of this. So I think, we got the answer in our own hands. Err on the side of caution and turn the licence down rather than have an accident or something happen with the public. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Pam. Councillor Tom Beedle.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just wanted some clarity because with the upper age limit, that is it's a recommendation. It's not legislation. Because it's a recommendation, I believe that we as an authority can actually place that restriction because it is only a recommendation. If it was legislation, then we'd have to abide by that specific legislation. But given the age of the fleet, I think that I just want clarity on that because I believe that we do have the powers to put that in place because it is purely a recommendation and not legislation.
Yeah, you are right, Councillor. You can put it. You can't say we will. You can say it's highly likely that we'll not license vehicles up to a certain age because you've always got to have the discretion to depart from it if you need to be. But yeah, you are right. You can, but you can put an upper age limited. They cannot be expected to be licensed after a certain age. If you wanted to put it in your policy, you can. But as it goes against the recommendations, then of course you're open to challenge always on appeal, aren't you? And that's your risk. Because that's a public document that's in the pack, so people can always refer to it.
Thank you, Andrea. So basically, we'd be better off making that decision on the day of the inspection rather than putting it in the actual rules.
Yes, because it would give you more discretion, wouldn't it? Because if it says a vehicle has to be sort of no more than 5 years old, then if you look at the vehicle and it is more than 5 years old and you decide that it's not suitable, you just don't license it, do you? So you've got that discretion anyway, haven't you? Yeah. So if someone presents a vehicle, 12 years old, you can refuse it.
Thank you, Andrea. Councillor Altaf Hussain.
I'm sorry. Thank you very much, sir. It is, I have been an orthopedic surgeon. I would do hips and knees. Now, what we are discussing here is macroscopic, what we can see. We are not talking about the wear and tear of the machine itself. And we know in previous cars when we would change the pistons and everything because they would become loose. So every vehicle should have a warranty from the manufacturers, and it should say how long we can carry on using that vehicle, which is not a problem these days. And we should take into account, rather than we deciding about those microscopic wear and tear of these vehicles, because we don't see that.
Yeah, but that's the whole point, isn't it, of our own testing station? They test all these mechanical issues to make sure that it passes is tests, which are quite stringent. So that's down to the mechanics, isn't it?
Perfect, that's right. But do they consider the warranty from the manufacturers and their opinion, what they have said about the vehicle? Thank you.
Thank you, Arthur. Councillor Julia Williams.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just back to our policy about having vehicles from new. I mean, since I've been a councillor, every vehicle that's come before us, well, there's very few have been actually within this policy. But I think it was the last meeting or the meeting before, there was a vehicle in immaculate condition again. It was one of the meetings we did virtually, so we didn't actually see the vehicle. But it was 8 years old, and I think I expressed reservations then. And I can totally see what Andrea means. We're setting ourselves up for an appeal here. If the meeting before we passed a vehicle that was 7.5 years old, so why then don't we pass one in immaculate condition that's 8 years old? So this is back to my boring point again, that eventually we're going to have a 10-year-old vehicle that is immaculate, then a 12-year-old vehicle that's immaculate, and then somebody will come along with a 13-year-old one and say, oh, look, you passed a 12-year-old one last week. So when does it stop? That's all. Really.
But basically, that's down to you, isn't it? To
Yes, Andrea, it is down to us, and it's been down to us all the time to even not pass a vehicle that was 3 years old, because that's out of our policy,
Yes.
or 6 years old. But we've never done it, have we? Because, you know, we're going to have an appeal on our hands. So that's my point. When are we going to risk having an appeal and say, look, no more?
Well, we have loads of appeals anyway from obviously taxi drivers, and they've always been successful apart from the authority. It's up to you to be more. If you want to be more strict with your policy, that's in your hands. So if you don't want to license a vehicle, if the policy says 3 years old and you don't want to license them over 3 years old and you don't think there's any good reason, then you don't have to. And each case on its merits. So even if someone went to appeal and said, oh, well, last week somebody had a 7-year-old, a court won't take that into account. They'll only take into account the circumstances of this case. And if your policy says a reason, and the reason that you won't license it, you can stick to the reason. Is that if you want to be more stricter with your policy, then it's a matter for members to be more strict with their policy. Because even if you put an upper age limit on it, and somebody, if it was the upper age limit was 10 years and somebody presented with 12 years, you'd still have discretion to depart from your policy. So it's not going to stop you licensing older vehicles, is it? It's a matter whether you're going to more strictly adhere to the policy in place.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you, Julia. Thank you, Andrea. Councillor Pam Davis.
Yeah, we have actually turned down vehicles. We turned down a minibus that had scratches on the side and a small dent, and they had to go away and have it redone and reproduce it before us. And that wasn't a very big job, but it was. I mean, sometimes you think to yourself, oh, well, if they're being driven and, they're marking the outside, how are they driving it with the inside, etc. So we have turned down vehicles. I can't speak for you, Dave, because I'm not on your committee, but just to assure people that we don't let everything go through, and we use our own discretion, etc. And if something does look ropey or under health and safety, and we think that it's not fit, then we err on the side of caution. I would say to everybody, always err on the side of caution. You can't be chastised for doing that. It's better to do that than to let something go through that we've got doubts about. So, you know, we've always used our own discretion. I can't, you know, we don't get under the bonnet. We're not mechanics. So we got to leave that for the testing process. I agree with the age limits. You can have a vehicle that's been badly abused, a 2-year-old vehicle, as against a 10-year-old. And there are stringent requirements. So, you know, we haven't had many that have gone against us, I don't think, apart from the appeals, and they always have the ability to do that. So always err on the side of caution. You've got any doubts, and have a good old deliberation, and just don't pass it in the future. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Pam. Yes, I know of instances where we've turned taxis down because the seats weren't adequate and up to certain standards. So it does happen. Can
I ask, Chair, have we got, or can Yvonne give us an idea somewhere along the line, how many vehicles of 10 years or more have we actually got on the road? I know we got about 600 taxis, but it would be a help if we knew, because mostly when I go into town, etc., I don't see many older vehicles. It all seem to be newer vehicles. But could we have some idea maybe that would give us an idea, both committees, how many 10 years plus we have?
Yes, I'm sure Yvonne would be able to do that. Get that information, certainly.
Can I come in there, Chair?
Yeah.
So I think it's less than 10%. So it's quite a small percentage of the fleet that is over 10 years. Now, obviously, these will be vehicles that are subject to increased testing. So the vast majority of the fleet is I believe, from memory, and Yvonne may want to correct me, is around 6 years old, I think. And I think go back to the point I made earlier, because you have a very restrictive requirement at the moment about vehicles at the first point of licensing, that by allowing the trade to replace those vehicles with slightly older but still vehicles that are in a good condition, maybe the 2 or 3 years old, you do tend to see a more of a turnover in the replacement of vehicles. And so that goes back to my point that it actually becomes more economically viable for the trade to replace the vehicles more frequently, and you won't get an increase in the overall age profile of the fleet by adopting this policy. That would be my advice to members.
Thank you, Will. Councillor Mike Kearn.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This is not a question, it's more of a statement. I think I'm actually missing the actual ability to physically look at the vehicles ourselves like we used to do. I know the people that are doing the testing and checking these vehicles over are, professional. There's no argument about that. But sometimes, it's nice to actually see the vehicle yourself. You can have a good nose at it. You can sit in the back seats, have a nose in the boot. I think, until we get back into that kind of a system again, we are relying on other people to give us the information we want, whether we pass a vehicle or not. I think once this situation of pandemic is all over and we can get back to actually seeing the vehicles ourselves and giving it a good nose ourselves, I don't think we can, we just got to rely on other people's judgment on what they consider to be safe or not safe. That's all. It's just more of a statement.
That's right, Mike.
So, thank you.
I enjoy inspecting the windows with the code numbers to see if the glass equates.
Yeah.
So it hasn't been in an accident. Thank you, Mike.
Like Janice likes to pull the seatbelts apart. Yeah.
Yeah. With that, I've got nobody else wishing to speak. So we'll go on to the recommendations now. What we got to decide is whether we agree with the recommendations.
Move the recommendations.
Second, Chair.
Second. Okay. What I do now is ask, is anybody against the recommendations?
Chair, I'm not against the recommendations, but I'm going to certainly be more strict in future.
Chair, can you go through? Sorry, Chair, to interrupt. Can you go through the recommendations one by one, please, and seek approval for each one?
Okay, Andrea. Right. One is approve the proposal to amend the age policy guidelines to that from the 1st of February 2021. Vehicles submitted for licensing for the first time must be less than 5 years old from the date of first registration or first use date of manufacture if the vehicle is imported, with the exception of minibus type vehicles fitted with permanent automated tail lifts, which may be aged up to 10 years on the first licensing. Can somebody move and second that recommendation, please?
Move. Yeah, second.
Yeah.
All agree?
Yeah.
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 Thank you. The second recommendation, approve the proposal to amend the testing frequency so that from the 1st of February 2021, vehicles aged up to 10 years old will be tested twice a year, and vehicles that are 10 years or older will be tested 3 times a year. Proposer and seconder, please.
Move, Chair. Right.
Second.
All agree?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Third recommendation, approve the revised conditions which take effect from the 1st of February 2021 for hackney carriage and private hire vehicles as set out in appendices D and E. Mover and seconder, please.
Second.
All agree?
Yep.
Yeah.
We did have a mover, did we?
Yes.
Yep, thank you, Gary. Number 4, approve the declaration of fitness form set out in Appendix F for the use from the 1st of February 2021. Mover?
Move.
Right.
All agree?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Number 5, adopt the Freight Transport Association National Inspection Standards for hackney carriage and private hire vehicles as set out in Appendix G for the 1st of February 2021.
Move.
Right.
All agree?
Yep.
Thank you. 6, authorise the Chief Officer, Legal, HR and Regulatory Services to prepare and subsequently amend, if necessary, the detailed administrative processes in conjunction with the Fleet Workshop Manager at T. Richard Thomas. Move.
Right.
Second.
Second.
Thank you. All agree?
Yep.
Yeah.
And the final one, approve the proposal that applications which fall under the policy guidelines set out at 1 above are dealt with by the Chief Officer, Legal, HR and Regulatory Services under the scheme of delegations to officers. In addition, to approve the proposal that in a case where an applicant fails to submit an application for the renewal of a licence prior to the expiry date and the application falls outside the policy guidelines, the requirement for the application to be dealt with by a subcommittee is waived, provided that the application is received within 5 working days of the expiry date. All other cases falling outside the policy guidelines will be dealt with by a subcommittee.
Right.
Yeah.
Move.
Second.
Again,
Yeah.
all agree?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks very much for that, everybody. We're on to the next item on the agenda, which is urgent matters. We have
Chair,
no.
Chair,
Yeah.
sorry for interrupting. I'm just thinking, we can't at the moment because of this pandemic, but do you think that Yvonne could arrange for us to go down to the workshop sometime and have a look exactly if there was a taxi or a minibus there to go through, exactly what the mechanics do? I'm not saying every screw and every every little bit of it, but it would give us all a better idea of exactly what tests and how stringent those tests are. I think it would be really beneficial to all of us to see that. We can't do it at the moment, I know, but what do members think about that? I'm sorry, Dave, to interrupt.
I'm sure that would be useful, certainly.
Yes.
Yvonne?
Yes.
Yeah,
Great.
Chair. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, Chair, I'd be happy to speak to the fleet's manager when it's safe and appropriate, and to arrange that for members.
So there we
Yeah.
are. So by April, that should be all arranged, look. He'd be back to normal by then.
Sir Chair, it should be day out.
Yeah.
Yeah, lunch on you as well then, Chair.
Absolutely.
Aye, all right. Right. As I said, we're on to urgent items. There are no urgent items, so therefore I will close.